few bones on our behalf, but it's worth it to take the, instead of end up redoing it 17 times. So, that's all I had. So, Jeff, take it away.
Great. All right, I do have two handouts. There's two different things stapled together. And what we are talking about now is the budgeting and engineering contract review for the Schoenfelder property. And the one of the documents that you have, the one I want to talk about first is the email chain that you see, but I want you to look at the second page first, at the bottom, the email from me. It's just a little more concise. What I did was I had DGR start at the beginning and say, I want a roadmap. I want this laid out with every, I'll say, worst case cost that we could incur from start to finish if DGR was handling literally every portion of the project, which ultimately we won't do because we didn't do it over here, and I'm assuming we'll end up with the same scenario with our builders and quality and stuff, where we won't do that over on Schoenfelder as well. But it was, what I wanted to do was to make sure that worst case scenario, where would we fall when everything was said and done. So what you're seeing on the bottom of the second page, if you go right down where it says topo, their costs are broken out per portion of work. So the first thing we need to do is get a topo done on the property. The topo does a lot of different things for us. It helps us figure out, do we need all of the lift station? There's a possibility we don't, but we can't confirm it until we know what the contours of the land are and slopes and all that stuff. So that comes from the topo. The second one is the concept design, and I'll get into the cost thing in a minute. Concept design is where our building committee is where we'll take charge of what that is going to be. We've already seen two concepts from DGR, but they were concepts from DGR. They weren't necessarily City of Crooks. So we started the design committee, and other than you, I can't say the other two names. They're new to me. I still haven't met everybody. We're doing the email thing. So, there's three people and myself, and what we're going to do is take that piece of property, use the DGR information, and figure out what does the City of Crooks want. Are there other things besides single-family homes? Should it be things? Should there be a park? Should there be a green space? Should there be this? Should there be sidewalk? Should there be, all this stuff we're going to pour into the design mix and come up with a concept that the design committee will show CHRC, and we'll move forward from that standpoint. So instead of, which is why you're seeing some of these numbers so low, it's something that we are going to do as a design committee with some guidance from DGR, but we're not going to drag them through our conceptual design. We'll take care of that as a committee, and then I'll work with Jesse on coming up with some drawing things that I can do on behalf of our committee, and then we'll end up giving that to Jesse, and then they'll do their magic with what they do. So that's where the concept design comes from. They'll be working with what we come up with, and it's really quite exciting, because when you think about what do we want, start with what do we need, and we need 70 to 80 lots, but almost more than that, we need X number of dollars in sales, and what gets us to that X number of dollars could be a mix of a lot of different things. And honestly, I have nothing preconceived, so it will be an interesting exercise to go through what could it be. And kind of what, Mike, what you and I talked about was, Crooks has never got to do this before. This is the first time. I mean, what we did over here was somebody else's plan. It was never really a Crooks thing. So it'll be interesting to see what falls out when we start shaking the box and dump it out, you know. So I'm kind of looking forward to it. Then after that, there's a preliminary subdivision plan that has to be submitted. It's a procedural thing, and then it goes into development plans, and then the construction documents is what they do, you know, to get our contractors on board. And then I broke it into 3 phases, just because I don't know how sales will go. It's certainly going to look a lot better when they're digging dirt and building walls for a new school. So I used 3 phases when we broke this out. So you'll see a phase 1 construction documents and a phase 1 construction administration. The construction administration is the one that we reduced. I don't know if it was nearly to nothing. It was almost on an as-call basis, I think, from what we did over here. So, but if we had them do everything, these are the numbers that would take. And I'll go over numbers in a second. But so that's how it kind of breaks out in the phases that's going to be required to get from start to finish. So the next thing we had talked about was, what does a schedule look like? And basically our schedule works backwards. You don't have to look for this, but I just want to make sure I'm saying it. It works backwards from phase 1 construction start in spring of 21. So we buy the land in December. In April, May, we start, you know, as soon as we can start.
We won't have the cash flow.
It all depends.
Well, if Mark magically sells all our lots between now and then,
Well,
yeah, okay.
well,
Yeah,
you
go
know,
ahead.
you know, but we gotta look at something.
Yep.
So what that means is, I worked with Jesse to work this backwards to looking for a notice to proceed on the very first thing in April. And if you really want to follow this along, go to, it's the 4th page from the back on the DGR proposal. And I get through all this, and I'm going to go specifically through costs on each phase. So we start in April, notice to proceed, and what we're going to do is, well, what I'm proposing is that we don't have to approve everything. We just need to approve it incrementally. And as long as we know where we're heading, that just makes that easy. And so we'll get a notice to proceed to get the topo done. They'll do the topo in May. Then we will use June and, you know, in May, June and July for our design committee. And that's when we'll come up with the concept stuff. So then the concept plan by sometime in July, I'd say the end of July, will be done. And then from that, they go into that preliminary development subdivision plan from that. So, and then it goes from there, it goes through the engineering plans and the phase 1 stuff and blah, blah, blah. And it will cycle all the way through. So the way that this breaks out in cost, I didn't want to come up with something that was, oh, here's the total, which to somebody that's not in the industry, it makes you fall over. Because I know how people get when I tell them what total costs are. So the way that this breaks out is we have the initial cost to do the topo is $5,500, which is pretty darn reasonable because we pay a lot more than that for a lot less. So I think Jesse's being very good to us. Concept design that's something that we'll turn over. Their cost then to get that to a point that looks like the ones they showed us before. You know, gets them to the point where we'll have this as a concept design with a little more information on it. So their cost then is $4,900 after that. The preliminary subdivision plans is all explained in their proposal, but their cost for that is $4,200. Then after that, it's the plating process, so there's a development plan for the plating was $13,100. And then phase one construction docs is $51,600. So, but the way that this works for us is, if we want to, we could approve the topo.
Sure.
You know, and in July or in June, we could approve the concept design, and we could approve, because they'll bill monthly, percent complete, like engineering companies do, which is normal. And so our upfront is, I mean, it's pretty good to get to that concept design. We haven't spent $15,000 yet. So the biggest question I asked Jesse, you know, if you can go through this and the whole thing adds up to $340,800, you know, there's reimbursables in there and stuff. But that's worst case. Now, I'm not saying that we won't spend that much, because we could say that we're getting busy, we don't want to be in the middle of everything, we want you to do all the contract administration. And they'll do what they do building streets. They'll do, that might not be the best example considering what they've suffered through this last year. But I mean, they can do that, but we have numbers for that. So, God, I just lost my train of thought. Okay. So there's that total number out there with reimbursables. So what I had him do was, I said, okay, this is great. It makes sense to me. I'm following it. It's tracking it, and it actually works. Because what I wanted to do was to try and figure out, where does this put us when we are done if we sell all the lots? You know, are we in the red? Are we in the black? So there's a paragraph in here on the third page. I didn't highlight it because it's kind of like chicken scratching. But just using 81 lots at a low end cost of $44,000. Some will be higher, some will be lower. There's a total revenue then of $3,564,000. So you start figuring out, okay, what are we spending then? Are we over that or are we less than that? So our initial figure of 2.4 is solid. You know, it's okay. Of what we would expend for construction on those 81 lots. So you take 2.4, you add our 600,000 that we've got invested in the property. We're only at $3 million. So at that point, we're in the black by over $500,000. And that's using the worst case with $340,000 worth of fees. So it looks pretty good. So what I did then, I had Jesse go back and say, I can't explain this without you comparing this one. I want you to go back and compare it with what we did over here on the development with what we're doing over there. I need to see that. And there was a good discussion related to that. So the very first page is the last email that Jesse sent me. So if you look at the basic breakdown was a percentage, and I'm just going to talk about the percentages because the dollars really don't mean a whole lot at the moment. Percentages of design and percentage of construction dollars versus what the total expenditure is. So if we look at the first one, so at $3.5 million, our engineering design is at 4.5%. You know, if we have them do all the construction, we're at 9.6%. Comparing that to the Palmera reconstruction project, you know, that was about a $3 million expenditure. The engineering design was 2 points higher. And the construction was, you know, 4 points higher. So I'm very comfortable in the numbers he gave me for, you know, for a worst case. And on the grand scale of the potential of where we could end up, but we're gonna be fine, because I'm using worst case instead of trying to be the good guy. You know, I wanna know what the facts are. So, what you have in front of you from DGR is their actual proposal for the entire project, literally start to finish, for the Schoenfelder property. It covers very specifically and in great detail what each component is. So if you wanted to know what the topographic boundary survey is, there are literally, you know, it's 2